Hello, my mother works in an office and I grew up listening to stories like this at dinner. This isn't just content for use, it's a life experience that every other person can relate to. Everything you hear is fictional, names, companies, addresses, but the truth is in the reaction. Don't repeat other people's mistakes.
I knew something was wrong the moment Elliot walked into the lobby. Slick hair, louder-than-life loafers, and that wide, arrogant grin kids get when they think the world owes them applause just for showing up. He didn't shake my hand, didn't look around, just stood there in front of reception like he'd already conquered something. Said, too loudly, "Who's the dinosaur with the Rolodex? This isn't 1987. I didn't even look up. Just slid the final renewal memo into its sleeve and kept organizing the tabs by legacy tier. I'd seen Cocky come and go, but this one smelled like trouble. He strutted toward the elevators, all chest and MBA, muttering to someone from HR, "If we want to modernize, we need to cut dead weight. People still using paper are dead weight." I smiled, but my hands tightened on the edge of the folder, because that morning the Kreslin contract had come in signed, $13.2 million over 5 years, and I was the only one that client would even speak to. Before we go any further, do me one favor. Tap that subscribe button and like the video. It's free, takes a second, and keeps stories like this alive. Thanks from the whole team. Now, back to Elliot. See, I wasn't some relic hoarding old contact cards out of stubborn pride. That Rolodex, it held the trust of 34 families who'd been with us through 3 recessions, 4 acquisitions, and more scandals than I care to count. My blue tab group, Legacy Oil and Ranch Wealth, had never once renewed a contract with an email. It was always calls, handshakes, and, if you were really lucky, a breakfast at Royce Mallory's place out in Junction, where he didn't let a soul through the gate without knowing their grandpa's middle name. I'd been there 4 times. Elliot wouldn't last 30 seconds past the cattle guards. Every big deal DNR toasted on those fancy quarterly calls, I had a fingerprint on it. Not in the press releases, never in the group photos. But when their 3rd largest client almost pulled out over a misquoted clause, who fixed it? Me. When a $60 million legacy partner ghosted the founder during COVID, I sent a handwritten letter, got a call back in 3 days, renewal signed in 5. But none of that mattered to Elliot. He came from the school of CRMs and LinkedIn flexes, where relationship meant drip campaigns and automated birthday emails. He saw my system and laughed. Outdated garbage, he called it. Even asked if I knew what a database was. I didn't answer. Just flipped to the green tabs. Regional manufacturers, Midwest base, usually quiet unless someone messed with their freight terms. They'd backed out of deals before. And guess whose name was inked into all their vendor agreements? Mine. Then came the finance email. "Hey, just confirming March commission disbursement amounts. Please verify before next week." That had never happened before. Not once in 14 years. Something about it prickled. I reread the message twice, then opened the black binder from 2012, the one I hadn't touched in a decade. Section 9B, clear as day, termination without cause within 45 days of fiscal year commission disbursement shall trigger full payout as if employed. My signature, the founder's signature, Kreslin's launch memo stapled to the back. I sat with it for a while. Didn't get angry, didn't even feel surprised, just printed the page, slid it into my briefcase, and waited. Because I'd seen enough young bloods come in hot, burn bright, and forget one thing. The only currency that lasts in this business is trust. And that Rolodex? That wasn't garbage. It was gold. Elliot took over like a kid, handed the keys to a sports car he didn't know how to drive. First week, he changed the department name to Strategic Rev Ops Fusion. No one knew what it meant, but we all got an email with the new logo. 2 arrows chasing each other in a circle, like a bad stock photo of synergy. The same day, he scheduled 30-minute one-on-ones with everyone from entry-level account reps to the senior VP of partnerships. I wasn't on the list. Instead, his assistant pinged me. Elliot would like a full digital export of all current client relationships and communication histories. Due by Friday. I stared at the message a long while, the kind of long where you go numb before you laugh. My system wasn't digital, it was tactile, intentional. Rolodex cards with pen scratches and thumbprints, memos printed on the back of receipts, handwritten notes that said things like, "Don't ask about son's startup, he's in rehab again," or "Bring peach cobbler to annual review, only dessert Royce eats post-stroke." None of that fits in a CRM. I walked into his glass-walled office and set the blue tab section on his desk. "What's this?" he asked, barely glancing. "My client files. You asked for a summary." He flipped one card, then another, scoffed. "This looks like my grandma's recipe box." "That's because your grandma probably cooked with care," I said. He laughed, mocking, not amused. "Seriously? This is how you manage accounts worth millions?" "No," I replied. "This is how I maintain relationships that have been worth millions every year since before your LinkedIn account had a headshot." He pushed the box back like it was contagious. "We're moving forward, not clinging to the past." "Forward's fine," I said. "Just know where your feet are first." He didn't respond, just waved his hand and turned to his laptop like I was a fly he could shoo away with browser tabs. I left the cards there. The same afternoon, an email landed from finance. "Hi, just checking. Have you finalized your Q1 projections for commission? Please respond by end of week." Now, understand, March commissions don't close until mid-month. No one had ever asked me to finalize numbers early. I sat back and reread it 3 times, then opened the old manila folder in my bottom drawer, the one with my original offer letter. 14 years of dust lifted when I cracked it open. And there it was. Section 9B. Termination without cause within 45 days of fiscal year commission disbursement shall trigger full payout as if employed. I remembered now how I'd pushed for it in the final round of negotiations after the Kreslin win. Their lawyers had balked, but I held the line. Told them trust has to cut both ways if they wanted mine. Funny thing, everyone always thinks paper trails are slow, but when they hit hard. I printed 2 copies of that clause, folded one into my purse, just in case. The other went into a legal envelope addressed to my attorney. Not because I knew exactly what Elliot was planning, but because I'd seen this dance before. Strip the old guard, cut costs before bonuses land, make a chart to impress investors. They always forget who built the floor that chart stands on. I started packing things slowly, quietly. The good pen, the real notebooks, not the branded ones. My backup phone charger. And the photo of me shaking Royce Mallory's hand at the West Texas summit, back when Elliot was probably still throwing foam darts in his dorm room. Let them try. Let them file me under legacy cost. I had my clause. And 34 families who didn't trust logos, they trusted me. The meeting invite came through with no subject line, just a vague alignment check-in, room 3C. That was his style. Keep it casual so no one panics until it's too late to prepare. I showed up 5 minutes early. Habit. Room was empty except for a half-drunk oat milk latte and Elliot's laptop already open to a Google Doc titled Phase 1 Staff Streamline. No chairs had been moved. He wanted to stand. When he walked in, he didn't greet me, just swiped his badge, let the door click shut behind him, and nodded once like we were about to start a TED Talk. I stayed standing. "You've been here a while," he said, pacing slow, arms folded like he was trying out some authority pose he learned on YouTube. And I respect that. Legacy knowledge, tribal memory, all that. But we're scaling now. We need agile thinkers. I raised one eyebrow, said nothing. He reached down, grabbed the Rolodex I'd left in his office 2 weeks ago, still untouched, and without even glancing at it, he dropped it into the recycling bin by the door. It landed with a thick, uneven thunk. Plastic cracked against cardboard. He smiled, like he'd just euthanized a problem. "This isn't the 90s, he said, voice too casual for what he was doing. "You're done. No HR rep, no formal write-up, no severance summary, just that. You're done." Like I was a bad habit he'd finally kicked. I didn't flinch, didn't ask why. I knew why. They were trying to clear the decks before March 10th. What he didn't know, what no one had bothered to research, was that Section 9B was now a fuse and he'd just lit it. I walked to the bin, bent down, rifled through until I found the blue tab. Royce Mallory, my Sharpie note still visible. Trust has time, not pitch. No rush closes, no PowerPoint, knows cattle better than people. Let him speak first. That card had seen 6 renewals, each one personally signed. His family didn't do e-signatures. They did fountain pens and handshake ink. I tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I turned to Elliot and said, "Congratulations." He blinked. "For what?" For making your first executive decision. He tried to smirk, but it twitched, like some part of him registered something off, but he couldn't name it. Good luck with renewals, I added, and walked out before he could puff up again. Back at my desk, I didn't pack a box. My things had been trickling home for days. All I left behind was a framed thank you note from Crestland and an embossed paperweight that read, "Relationship first." It had been a gag gift. Now it felt like a gravestone. Reception didn't ask where I was going. They just held the door like they always had. I stepped out into the parking lot, thumbed the card in my pocket, and looked at the time. 11:42 a.m., March 3rd, 7 days before commissions locked, and exactly 44 days before the clause window closed. Timing, Elliot. Timing is everything. They didn't see it coming. At exactly 12:57 p.m., 3 hours after Elliot's little power play, my counsel sent the email, subject line bold and sharp, Section 9B, Termination Precedent. It landed in the inboxes of Durham and Rake's general counsel, head of HR, and the founder's longtime assistant, who still controlled the executive calendar, even though most people thought she'd retired 2 years ago. Attached were 4 files. The first, my original employment contract, signed on real paper, scanned clean, complete with the founder's faded signature in blue ink. He always used blue so people couldn't claim it was copied. Section 9B, circled in red. The second, a PDF of call logs showing my interactions with key legacy clients, including Crestland, from January through March, all time-stamped, all tied directly to active renewals. The third, a tidy string of emails with finance, confirming projected commission amounts, including a reply from their own senior analyst acknowledging that the Crestland renewal was expected to close before the March 10th payout window. And the fourth, a breakdown of bonus disbursement history. Year over year, my totals, the dates, my averages, the revenue impact of my client base versus other strategic leads. In other words, proof. Proof that I wasn't just another headcount. They were trying to stiff a legacy asset days before her check cleared. I imagine it was the kind of silence that hits a law office like a stomach drop. Fluorescent lighting, air too dry, the rhythmic clack of keys halting mid-stroke as someone opens a file they thought was just a formality, only to realize it's a bomb. Because Elliot, in his infinite wisdom, hadn't just fired someone. He'd breached a contract signed by the company's founder, with terms so specific they might as well have come with a countdown clock. March 3rd, termination. March 10th, disbursement. The exact 7-day gap the clause warned about. It was textbook and enforceable. At 1:04 p.m., legal replied to my counsel with one sentence. We're reviewing the terms and will respond shortly. At 1:06 p.m., my attorney sent the follow-up. We'll consider waiving punitive damages and breach penalties if the full amount, base commission plus historical bonus average plus 6.5% interest, is wired within 5 business days. No emotion. No threats, just facts. Cold, hard numbers that turned Elliot's smug grin into a very expensive mistake. And here's what made it worse. The founder was still listed on every document. His name, on the contract, the bonus logs, the client-facing memos. Elliot hadn't even realized he'd cut off someone who was tethered to his own father's pen. By 2:15 p.m., I got the first text. Not from HR, not from legal, but from Carol in executive support. They're all in the conference room. Haven't seen legal look this pale since the IPO clause disaster. What did you do? I just replied, read the footer of my contract. 2 minutes later, oh my God. They could have just paid me in March like they always did. Quiet, clean. Legacy checked off the list. But no, they wanted a headline for the restructure memo. They wanted to show the board they could cut costs, streamline headcount, modernize the team, so they chose optics over understanding, flash over function. And in doing so, they triggered a clause no one had read in 13 years, but one I had kept in a folder marked, if they ever forget. Elliot forgot. Now he was going to remember. By 3 p.m., every door on the executive floor was shut. The kind of shut that said careers were being triaged behind soundproof glass. Legal was in full scramble mode. Not just reviewing my file, but every single legacy agreement that had ever crossed the desk of the founder's office. They tore through the old archive folders like it was a crime scene. Sweat on the brow, jargon flying, and fear crawling up the spine of anyone who'd ever approved a commission without reading the fine print. And what did they find? Nothing. No second clause, no twin agreement, no fallback precedent. Section 9B was a unicorn, a one-time inclusion, hand-cut by me and the founder during those late 2012 negotiations after I landed Crestland. Back then, they wanted the contract bad enough to agree to anything, so long as I signed fast and got the ink from Royce Mallory. It was buried in the appendix titled Continued Employment Assurance in High-Yield Contract Years. No one had touched it since. Elliot hadn't even looked. He fired me cold. No review, no audit, just vibes and arrogance. And now the dominoes were tipping fast. At 3:19 p.m., finance finally ran the numbers. The commission I was owed for Q1 alone, Crestland, Grady Oil, and the early rollover from Elmsworth Tools came to 1.4 either. Add bonus historical average, $540K. Add penalty interest from the clause, another $280K. Total liability, $2.122 million. That's the kind of number that makes board members call each other. The kind of number that makes investor relations start updating risk disclosures. And the kind of number that makes a founder sit back in his chair and mutter, "What the hell did my son just do?" But here's the part they didn't see coming. The real fallout had nothing to do with the payout. It had everything to do with trust. Because the legacy clients, they weren't just names on an invoice. They were people. People who called my direct line on birthdays, who sent me hand-signed Christmas cards, who told me when their daughters got married or when their CFO got arrested or when the new buyer from corporate didn't get the business. People who did business on stories, not slide decks. And those people were about to find out I was gone. Not retired, not promoted, fired, with no warning, no handoff, no goodbye call, just erased. At 3:42 p.m., an email went out from Elliot's office. Subject line, client reassignment, legacy accounts. It hit my old inbox, which IT hadn't disabled yet. I read it with a kind of numb fascination. It listed 16 accounts, all blue tab, all mine. At the bottom, a cheerful line. Your new point of contact is Bethany Weathers, Strategic Client Coordinator. Bethany had been hired last November. She once told me she thought Crestland was a hedge fund, didn't know what a cattle futures contract was, thought Royce Mallory was that guy with the bourbon company. I stared at the email for a long moment, then hit forward. To Royce. No subject. Just one sentence. Thought you'd like to know who's calling next week. At 3:47 p.m., his office responded. We're still on for Thursday? Yes, I replied. Good, they wrote. Mr. Mallory doesn't take meetings with strangers. Panic was spreading in the halls of Durham and Rake, but I was calm, because while they were searching files, chasing memos, and praying no other contracts had landmines, I was sitting with the one thing they couldn't download, replicate, or fake, their client's trust, and they'd just fired it. By 3:47 p.m., the temperature in the glass box they called the executive suite had dropped 10 degrees. The chief of business development, Warren Ellis, old-school corporate tactician with a comb-over sharp enough to slice deli meat, stood frozen at the printer, holding a single piece of paper like it had personally threatened his 401k. It was an email, 6 weeks old. Subject, Ranch Renewal, Meeting Confirmed. From R. Mallory Office, atwcranchholdings.com. To me. Timestamp, 7:06 a.m., Monday. Sent with a little smiley face in the footer, the office manager's signature touch. Warren's hand trembled just enough to betray him as he carried it into the war room, where legal, finance, and Elliot were trying to triage the $2.2 million commission fire I'd quietly lit under their chairs. He slapped the paper down and said, "This was for today." Elliot leaned in, read it once, blinked. Wait, that's today? 4 o'clock, in the lobby. This lobby? Warren didn't answer, just looked at the ticking wall clock like it was counting down to their funeral. Royce Mallory didn't do Zoom, didn't do scheduling apps, didn't circle back. He did paper, he did direct lines, and he only renewed contracts after looking someone in the eye and shaking their hand. My hand. And now I wasn't on payroll. There was no meeting room booked, no agenda, no presentation deck, no sales lead assigned. They'd fired the one person Royce trusted. Not because I'd failed, but because I had too many handwritten notes and not enough slide animations. Elliot's face had gone pale. The kind of pale that makes you realize you've not just screwed up. You've insulted a man who could cost you your entire quarterly forecast. Warren tried to spin it. We can pull Bethany in, brief her, prep her notes, get her downstairs for the meet. Elliot shook his head before Warren even finished. He doesn't know her. They all stood still for a moment, staring at the email like it might change if they blinked hard enough. At 3:55 p.m., Elliot called IT. Is she still active in the system? She who? The voice on the other end asked. There was silence. Then, finally, her. Another pause. Yes, but her account logs show she's still online, reading emails. Elliot swallowed hard. Get her badge deactivated. And that's when the founder walked in. No knock, no announcement, just that heavy, unmistakable footfall of a man who hadn't been seen in the building since Christmas. He looked around the room. No one spoke. Then he pointed to the paper still sitting in front of Warren. What's that? Elliot answered too fast. Just an old client meeting, nothing critical. The founder picked up the page, read, paused, then raised his eyebrows. Mallory? Elliot didn't answer. The founder looked around the room again, like he was trying to decide whether anyone in it still knew what business they were in. Then, softly, almost too calm to trust, who's meeting him? Again, no answer, because everyone in that room already knew the answer. No one. Royce Mallory was about to walk through the doors of Durham and Rake expecting a handshake, and the only person whose hand he'd ever shaken there had been fired that morning. At 4:02 on the dot, the building's sliding doors parted like a curtain at a very quiet funeral, and out of the black SUV stepped Royce Mallory, same hat he always wore, weathered felt, sweat-stained band, and the same boots that probably cost more than Elliot's suit, but had the mileage of 1,000 contracts behind them. He didn't rush. Royce never rushed. He moved like the world waited for him, because in his world, it did. Inside the lobby, it got quiet. Reception stopped mid-sentence. An intern froze with a latte tray halfway to the counter. Even the security guard stood a little straighter. Royce scanned the space once. Not impatient, just collecting. Then his eyes found me. I stood near the directory board. No badge, no briefcase, just me, coat folded over one arm, Kreslin card still in my pocket. He walked straight over, didn't even glance at the polished floor or the abstract corporate art someone spent $30,000 installing last quarter. He held out his hand. You ready? There was weight in that question, not just about the meeting, about everything. I took his hand, steady as ever, and said, I was fired this morning. His grip tightened, just slightly. Enough to register it wasn't just a courtesy shake anymore. It was a pulse check. He paused, looking at me fully now, not surprised, just verifying. Fired? I nodded once, then turned, just enough to gesture toward the elevators where Elliot stood with a tablet in one hand and a face that didn't know whether to wave, hide, or vaporize on the spot. Royce followed my eyes, took one step closer. Who fired you? He asked, his voice low, carrying like distant thunder. I tilted my head toward Elliot, said nothing. Royce stared at him for a long moment, long enough for 3 people to slowly back away from Elliot's general vicinity. Then, quietly, like he was asking if the kid had just kicked a fence full of bulls. Son, did you just cost yourself a ranch deal? Elliot tried to smile. Mr. Mallory, I wasn't aware you two had. No, Royce cut in. You weren't. The founder appeared at that exact moment. Must have been watching from the mezzanine. He descended the steps without ceremony, suit jacket folded over one arm, jaw set like someone had just told him the will had been changed and he wasn't in it. Royce, he said, trying to inject calm. Don't, Royce replied. Not angry, not loud, just final. Walked in here expecting a meeting, he continued. Instead, I find the only person I trust in this whole damn building standing there without a badge. The founder said nothing. Royce turned back to me. You still got the numbers? In my purse, I said. He nodded. Let's go. And just like that, he turned and walked out. No meeting, no renewal, no second chances. As the doors closed behind us, I glanced back once. Elliot still rooted to the floor, blinking like he'd just been hit with a cattle prod made of ice water in regret. He wanted modernization. Instead, he got a master class in what legacy actually meant. And the $60 million handshake, it walked out with me. The conference room on the 7th floor sat fully staged, mahogany table gleaming, fruit tray sweating under the recessed lights, 3 binders stacked neatly with Royce's name embossed in silver. Bethany had even printed out a last-minute "Welcome, Mr. Mallory" sign using a template from Canva. It sat untouched at the head of the table, hopeful and humiliating. At 4:26 p.m., the receptionist called up to ask if the meeting had moved locations. By 4:40, one of the interns, Trey, always overdressed, was sent to check the lobby. He came back pale. They left. Silence. No one asked who "they" meant. Everyone already knew. By 5 arg, legal had redlined 4 versions of a clarification memo they hoped could be passed off as a misunderstanding. Legacy realignment in client partnerships, they called it. Internal systems migration. All fluff, all too late. At 5:14, Royce's office sent their reply. Subject line, renewal. Body. We'll be reviewing other partners moving forward. Trust is earned, not bought. No salutation, no signature, no second paragraph. The legal team just stared at it, like they thought it might finish loading with better news. By 6 Mai, the founder walked back in. Not storming, not shouting, just quiet. He looked older in that moment, shoulders not quite square. His eyes swept the room like he could still see Royce standing there, hat in hand, ready to sign. "Which one of you thought it was a good idea," he said softly, "to fire her without reading her contract?" No one answered. Bethany stared at the floor. Warren busied himself with his glasses. The GC opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing there wasn't a single clause that could be cited in defense. And Elliot? He just sat there, elbows on the table, fingers steepled like he was praying the ceiling would cave in and bury the day before it could make the annual report. The founder turned toward him, full now. "You fired her," he said again, 7 days before commissions. "You didn't check with legal. You didn't check with me. You didn't check with the people who know what the hell Crestland and Mallory and the Elmsworth contracts even mean." Elliot tried to speak, but it came out as a shrug, disguised as posture. "She had a Rolodex," he mumbled. "We're trying to modernize." The founder closed his eyes for a long time. Then he opened them, fixed them squarely on his son, and said something that didn't sound angry. It sounded tired. "That Rolodex paid for this building." No one spoke after that. No one dared. The lights above the conference table flickered once. Someone coughed. The fruit tray sat untouched. A single grape rolled off onto the carpet. It was the only thing that moved in the whole room. The meeting Royce never attended would be recorded in the system as no-show client cancellation. But everyone there knew the truth. They didn't just lose a deal. They lost what held the deals together, and the person who held it, she wasn't coming back. The wire hit my account at 9:12 a.m. Friday morning. No memo, no note, just a transfer ID and a balance that confirmed every decimal of what I was owed. Commission, bonus average, and a tidy 6.5% penalty for the insult. Durham and Rake didn't try to negotiate. They knew better. You don't argue with a signed clause and a client list that walked out your front door on a Wednesday afternoon. I didn't reply. Didn't send a thank you. I just closed the banking app, finished my coffee, and watched as movers rolled the last of the filing cabinets into my new office. Suite 204, second floor, directly across the street from the building I used to call home. Window view faced their lobby. I didn't plan that, but I didn't mind it either. Royce was the first to call. He didn't ask if I had time. He just said, "You got your own shingle now?" "I do." "Good. I prefer independence anyway. Too many layers over there now." "Got a proposal ready?" "It'll be on your desk by end of day." "You still use those cards?" I smiled. "Always." "Good. Call me if you need anything." He hung up. 2 hours later, Grady Oil emailed me directly. "Heard about the transition. We'd like to keep working with you, if possible. By lunch, Elmsworth Tools was on the phone. The CEO, not a rep, not a liaison, the CEO. "Tell me what we have to sign to keep you in our corner," he said. I hadn't even announced anything yet. No website, no press, no LinkedIn post full of forced inspiration. Just word of mouth, carried on the quiet current between decision makers who didn't care about logos. They cared about who showed up when the deal was on the line. And me? I just got back to work. No revenge campaign, no expose, no anonymous blog post with a headline like, "Why Women Over 40 Still Outperform Your Startup Stars." I didn't need to. I bought a new Rolodex, leather-bound, cream inserts, same color-coded tabs as before, green for industrial, yellow for tech, red for headaches I probably shouldn't take on again, but probably would. And blue? Blue was still for legacy, same names, same notes, just under a different roof. And under the first blue tab, Royce Mallory, I added a sticky note, the kind you leave for yourself, not to impress anyone. It read, "Let the young men run fast. I'll walk with the ones who remember." Because I didn't build my reputation on trends or tech stacks or executive vanity hires. I built it on handshakes, on showing up, on remembering whose kid broke their arm in '08, who lost their dog in 17, and who needed a reminder call the week before renewal because they always forgot, on purpose. And now, they remembered me. Durham and Rake will still have their meetings, their glass conference rooms, their digital dashboards with red zones flashing. But the deals, the real ones, they cross the street.